we're going to get started here in just a minute, but I would like to invite people to move forward if it's all right. If you need to leave early, that's fine, but it's always nice to, if people wouldn't mind moving to the front three or four rows, that always makes for a little bit better conversation, I think. So if I'm not asking too much, that would be great.
Thank you. It'll be more fun that way.
Yeah, right.
Good.
Okay, good afternoon. My name's Sam Drong. I'm the program director at PCs for People. I'll be moderating this panel here today. I do again I'll make the final announcement because I know the room names were off a little bit, but this is the session where we'll be talking about bridging the digital divide. So I would definitely like to thank the Minnesota Council for Nonprofits for hosting this conversation. And I'd also like to thank you guys for attending. It's the end of the day. I know it's the last session. It's always a little bit of a hard one to go to, especially when it's about a little bit difficult subject matter, to be quite honest. You guys have been here all day getting kind of fired up about technology and how to use technology to brand your message, to get out there and really do things. And now we're about to spend some time talking about the people that message isn't going to get to because there's issues. So I appreciate that you guys are willing to come in and listen to this talk. Before we really get started, I would like to just, since there's not a lot of people in the room, if we could maybe just go around real quickly, just stand up, say your name, what organization you're with, and maybe what brought you to the session and what your interest might be, if that's okay. We'll maybe just start right here in the front row. Thanks. And just for the people that have come in since we started, we're just going over real quick, introducing yourself, what organization you're with, and why you came to this session.
I'm Terry. I volunteer with Census. We have a number of programs, many in North Minneapolis, where it's a big issue. So I was just curious, and also just being a family member, I'm very curious about what those issues are.
Hi, I'm with Supplemental Legal Services as the Executive Director of Ethnicity here. And we're sort of really not all know there, so I'll introduce all three of us. We provide legal services kind of in Western County to low-income people with a variety of legal issues. And what we've discovered is a lot of times our clients have barriers that can be for financial reasons, might be access to mental health issues, or language barriers that make it difficult for them to access technology. That we really consider an aggregating thing, and this session is going to give us some ideas for how we can access technology.
I'm Jeannie, Jeannie Service Senior Resource Manager. I would just add that we have a federal funder that is encouraging us to have online intake for clients to apply, online everything. And when they do use it, the small numbers who do, it's frustrating. And I think that's more frustrating for them than to do that. They can apply at 2 o'clock at night when they're home from work. So,
Sure. Just a few more. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Don Peters. I'm with a nonprofit community practice on private credit. And we basically process claims for a federally funded program called the Child and Adult Care Relief Program, where we help subsidize and support in-home child care providers in Minnesota, as well as our child care creditors. And I'm just looking to see a lot of those centers, especially are in low-income areas in the state of Minnesota. I'm just trying to find out how technology has benefited us in serving these centers into our low-income population.
There's one more person in the back there.
Hello everyone, I'm Jen Swinger and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for University Council. The neighborhood council we call it. We have a very diverse neighborhood through age, income, culture, and the digital desert is something that we're addressing right now.
Okay. I think that was everybody, right? So thanks so much. I know that takes a few minutes, but it's nice to know who's in the room and kind of, I think we're all think on our feet kind of people and can try to tailor this a little bit to the people in the room. The one thing I'll say, I know there was a couple international organizations that were here. Most of the, at least the data, and I think our collective knowledge here is mostly, focused in the United States, but I have a feeling that the same sort of trends probably exist everywhere, at least as far as developed countries go. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes and kind of give some context to the conversation, and then I'll introduce our panelists. The main things that we just need to focus on, or I should say that the digital divide in general focus on, are basically the issues that come around with household income, race and ethnicity, age, educational attainment, and geography. Those are kind of the main factors at play when we're talking about digital divide issues. The one thing that I'd like to mention, the term the digital divide has come around for a while. It's been there. The Pew Research Center has recently come out, just in early 2015, they put out a study in April where they used a term, the homework gap. And I thought it was a really kind of interesting way to rephrase the issue that's been around for a while and kind of inject some new interest in the thing. The main thing that came away, the main fact that kind of came away from this was that there's 5 million there are 5 million households in the United States with children that are in the school system that don't have access to internet. So there's a pretty significant section nationwide, and that really does fall locally as well. These same sort of statistics, I've looked more locally when I can. These same sort of trends are all over the place. And it's always nice to, or I shouldn't say nice, but it's worth noting here at least on this graph, where that fall off happens, especially as it relates to people that gain more. So if you notice here, people with an annual income of under $25,000, they're just at 60% of those families actually have internet at home. So as compared to families that are even 50,000 or more, it's nearly 90% at 88%. So it's a significant kind of data point there. And obviously then it divides out amongst race as well. One of the things that PCs for People deals with directly is the inclusion side of things, making sure that people have a computer, a laptop, and an internet connection. It's a little bit hard to find up-to-date statistics about actual computer ownership, but some stats that did come out in 2012. This is most of the research that I'm going to go over is from the Pew Research Center. But basically, you can see here if income is below $30,000, basically there's 59% of computer ownership at that point. So it's really, again, a significant fall off. And if you're in a family that makes more than $75,000, you're significantly more likely. 96% of those families own a computer. I'll be going through these last things pretty quickly, but I'll be rotating between two different data sets. Basically, the first ones that I'll show you are from that same 2015 Pew Research Center study that analyzed their own data of internet users in general. So whether you're accessing internet on a phone, or whether you're accessing internet at the library or anything, just basically anybody that uses the internet will kind of be the first slide, followed up by a second slide of actual household ownership. And I think it's noteworthy to see the fall off when you hit the home ownership side of things. So this first chart is basically, similar to what we've been seeing. So if you make less than if a household makes less than $30,000, basically you're at 78% chance that they're using internet somewhere. Now compare that to using it at home. Now this is where it really falls off, and this is kind of where PCs for People tries to catch up. So of those families that are below $25,000, the chances that basically it's a coin flip whether or not someone has internet at home. Compared again to those numbers higher up, a family, again, just making $100,000 is going to be at 92% are going to be actually using it at home. So the race and ethnicity, you'll notice here there's not a huge variation. I think this just kind of goes to show, again, this is people just using the internet anywhere. People see that the internet is important, kind of regardless of ethnicity. They see the value in it. But when it actually comes to being able to afford it and use it at home, it really falls off. You'll see Hispanic, Black, and Native American families are much less likely to have internet connections at home compared to their white and Asian contemporaries. Age, again, this is probably not much of a surprise. The younger someone is, the more likely that they use the internet. These are, the term digital native gets used a lot. These are just people that are used to using the internet all the time. It falls off quite a bit over the age of 65. But again, once you start looking at who has access at home, again, it continues to fall off. But you notice the disparities aren't quite there as much when it comes to age. Educational attainment is obviously another thing. If someone has less than a high school education, and again, this is just using the internet, about 68% are actually using the internet somewhere, whether that's at the library or anywhere else. But once you get home, again, it's almost a coin flip again. 53% of those families with less than a high school education are going to have internet at home. And again, communities, and this is getting into a little bit of geography. I know we have a mixed room here of people representing rural and the urban. As Bernadine can point to a little bit later, it still is very much an issue in our rural communities, access, and you see those numbers here. This is just a chart showing kind of the places where adoption is struggling. Red is parts of the state that aren't aren't as good or part of the country. Thankfully, there's nothing in Minnesota, but I don't know exactly how accurate this map is. I know there's certainly pockets where it's a lot less lower, especially on various tribal lands and stuff. It falls off significantly. I know we had one person in the room here mentioning that they're work for people with disabilities. That's a huge issue as well. One of the things that the Pew Research found was that 54% of people with disabilities use the internet, and it's almost 40% of them have access at home. Last bit of stats, and then we'll turn it over to our presenters here, are just the reasons why people don't use the internet. I think it's noteworthy that the relevance and the usability are really point to the digital literacy gap. I think most people, if educated on the importance of the internet and what they can actually do with a computer and an internet connection at home, are going to be a lot more likely to want to use them. So again, it's, like I said, pointing out just the educational side, the relevance thing. The price, 20% of people that aren't accessing, that's where PCs for People comes in. And lack of availability and access is something that both Bernadine personally and the Blandin Foundation is really trying to address in ways too, where there's just a lack of access in some areas. So with that, I'm going to just end kind of the statistical side of my talk here, and I'm going to introduce Bernadine Jocelyn. Bernadine serves as the Director of Public Policy and Engagement at the Blandin Foundation. She's led the foundation's broadband programming since 2003. Blandin has sought to advance sustainable broadband adoption, increase community vitality, and enhance quality of life and place. While it's an important part of what the Blandin Foundation does, Bernadine's always quick to point out that it's the Blandin Foundation, not the Broadband Foundation. And Bernadine also represents Minnesota rural communities on the Minnesota Governor's Task Force for Broadband. Bernadine has a master's degree in public policy from Columbia University and a master's and undergraduate degree from the University of Minnesota.
Go Gophers.
Go Gophers. So, yeah, I think I can switch.
Hello, everybody. Gosh, it's great to be here today. Oh, gosh. Wait, save your applause, please. I'm really thrilled to have an opportunity to talk about this important topic with my good colleagues and buddies that we've been working together in this space for about a decade, I think now. PCs for People was an early partner with the foundation, and they do just amazing work, and it's a privilege to get to talk a little bit about it. So around every circle, you can draw a larger circle. This topic today is framed up as the digital divide. It's really at its heart, it's a session about disparity. And we all know from the introductions that disparity shows up in a lot of different ways in our society, and the digital divide is just one kind of fragment of that, one filter on it. So I flew in this morning, I was telling Sam, from the National Council on Foundations meeting in Washington, D.C., where all philanthropy gets together and tries to get better as a sector. And I attended a session entitled Putting Race on the Table. And it was a discussion about how we talk about stuff. And I've noted in my career that at the Blandin Foundation and the communities that I work that, you know, we talk about disparity, and now more and more you hear people talking about inclusion or even equity. And the comment was made there that foundations and philanthropy, and I don't know how true this is of many of us that are privileged to work with underserved populations feel, but that we're getting more comfortable talking about structural racism and about white privilege and white fragility, but not so much white supremacy, not so much. So anyway, that's kind of where the edge of the conversation among philanthropy was earlier this week. And I just wanted to bring that larger frame, that larger circle around this conversation, because this disparity is, of course, symptomatic of many other disparities. But as Sam said, we are not the Broadband Foundation. We really are the Healthy Community Foundation, Blandin Foundation. That's our mission, to strengthen rural communities. So I'll bring a rural frame to this, lens to this work. But we work on broadband because we get it, that it is critical to everything that we care about in vital communities, and that philanthropy as a sector needs to care more about, and that all of us, in everything, we like to say, everything is better with broadband. Everything is better with better broadband. And because it is very difficult in this particular space, public space, for communities to organize and do the work. It's very complex, it's technological, you know, it's very hard. That's the space that we've been working in to try to help communities get and use internet, because without it, people cannot participate fully in our democracy. So at the heart of it, it's really about democracy. And I commend all of you that you see in all the work. It was fun to hear the introductions, that you see there is this piece, this digital justice piece. So in our work, you know, we talked about diversity, inclusion, equity. So we heard some words here today. Digital divide, just inviting us to be mindful about how we frame this up to get where we want to go. So digital divide, digital literacy, digital desert, digital equity, media justice. So when we think about this, and really at the end of it, it really is about vital communities and quality of life. If I did it over again, I wouldn't call it the broadband initiative anyway, because it's really about vital communities. So what I want to do right now is the session was marketed to you. You came on the strength of the description, right? And it says in here that we're going to provide an overview of our approaches for addressing disparities. So that's what I'm going to do. And to do it, I'm going to use a little device that's called Pecha Kucha. Any of you guys familiar with it? So I was at it's been a busy April for me, and in Austin, Texas, where a bunch of people trying to do community broadband work gathered, I had the opportunity to talk about this topic as well. And at the imploring of the moderator for the panel, the poor panelists agreed to put this together. So Pecha Kucha is a Japanese kind of presentation style where it's 20 slides, 20 seconds for 6 minutes and 40 seconds. So this is an attempt to give you a flavor of the how, about how we do this work. But I want to again just point out that this is community. This model applies to any community change effort, because it's really about getting people together in the room to explore their hopes for their communities, to feel efficacious and hopeful. It's really about building hope at the end of the day. And I find in my community work and anything that it's that cynicism when people don't think that they can make a difference, that you're really having to fight. So this is a process that we use around broadband, but it's really the same community engagement, alignment, encouragement process that can be applied to any work. So I guess before I do the presentation, I just wanted to note from a rural perspective and have the connection to quality of life and prosperity for all. It's the putting that for all in there, I think, is what we need to keep focused on. That with an internet connection, with a good internet connection, preferably one with a good upspeed, with a good internet connection and a good idea, any small business can be a corner store in the global economy. And it's really exciting. It's really an exciting opportunity. So we just need to make sure that these disparities don't continue to grow. Sam's absolutely right. There's a terrible urban-rural disparity in access, and the ability to use tends to divide more on demographics and income and age, as Sam pointed out. But as an advocate for rural, it matters. So here we're going to go, and I think if I just, will you press the start button for me there? Oh, wait, let's get it into, first I want to look at, there's a presentation mode.
Yeah, you ready?
I think so. Okay. So Blandin Foundation is not the Broadband Foundation. We have a big, hairy, audacious mission, which is to strengthen rural Minnesota communities. And yet we do a lot of work helping rural communities get broadband and the skills to use it. That's because we understand that broadband is fundamental to everything we care about as a foundation. We understand that to survive and thrive, rural communities need access to world-class broadband networks and the skills to use them. Like many of you, we're involved in the change business. Change happens, but progress is optional. And therefore, most of all, we're in the hope business. Napoleon said, leadership is organizing hope. As a foundation, we have money in our toolbox, but one thing I've learned, it's not about the money. Community change is about local leadership. It's about organizing hope. It's people believing they can make a difference. And that indeed, to quote Jerry Garcia, somebody has to do something, and it's just incredibly pathetic that it has to be us. We see that rural communities can achieve big results with relatively little money when they're hopeful and confident. Encouraging inclusive, community-based teams to set goals and develop plans to achieve them is the best way to do good work well. At the heart of our approach is the convictions that communities know best what they need. The most sustainable impacts come when decisions are made closest to home. So we work with the whole community instead of by individual sectors. We organize community-wide planning and doing. This ensures that the work addresses the needs and the priorities that the community itself identifies. In my experience, if you've seen one rural community, you've seen one rural community. So it's very important that broadband leadership teams represent the community's diversity of experience, perspectives, and circumstances. We reach beyond the usual suspects at City Hall and Chambers of Commerce and keep asking our community partners, whose voice is missing? This insistence on inclusivity profoundly impacts how communities get stuff done on a whole host of tough issues, not just technology challenges. In the words of one of our partners speaking about the work in her community, this project has permanently changed the way we think and the way we act together. But most of all, doing this work well requires a commitment to cultivating relationships. Change follows relationship lines at the speed of trust. Supporting communities to name and claim our own broadband-enabled futures requires a commitment to the hard work of building relationships, building trust, and building hope. Here's how some of our community partners talk about this. This is Christine Fake from Akeley, Minnesota. She runs Second Stage Home Staging. We've turned a corner and become a community that's actually growing and thriving instead of stagnant and dying. The enthusiasm and energy that we've generated for the town is permanent. So I've tried to sum up in a nutshell our secret sauce to results like this. So first of all, communities know best. Involve community members directly in assessing their needs and articulating a shared community broadband vision. Local leadership matters. Train community leaders and champions to use participatory facilitation skills. Effective meeting facilitation can make a big difference in helping folks keeping coming back to the table, to the planning and implementation table. Broadband is not an end in itself. It is a means to the higher ends of increased economic vitality and improved quality of life. Framing the work in these terms is likely to be more successful than by calling out the technical infrastructure itself. High-touch outreach works. Effective recruitment strategies for late adopters are intra-community, hyper-local, high-touch, and personalized. Peers make great teachers. Peer-based learning formats that encourage local businesses to share practices, questions, and experiments are an effective, low-cost, and easily sustainable tool to build a community's technological savvy. Engage tomorrow's leaders today. Young people are not just future leaders. They're leaders today. Youth bring energy and sustainability to the work. They can serve as trainers, technology mentors, partners in computer refurbishment projects. Cross-community communication is key. Signage, local media support, and online social media are effective and low-cost ways to spur and sustain energy and excitement for community projects. Connect the economic dots. Help communities see and leverage the connection between technology and the benefits to the community. Workforce infrastructure, digital literacy, innovation, and marketing and advocacy are mutually interdependent aspects of community vitality. Have patience. This work takes time. Look for and celebrate the early and easy wins along the way, but think long term and build capacity and energy for the long haul. Money and other resources follow relationship and trust. So let me end with this reflection. It's not about the money. Positive change takes more than money. And what's more, money follows vision. More than money, sustainable change at scale takes time and tenacity, patience and endurance, vision and hope. For our kids and for all of the kids out there who expect to grow up in a world that's broadband enabled everywhere, it's up to us to do this hard work of building that future. Somebody's got to do something, and it's just pathetic that it's got to be us.
Thanks a lot, Bernadine, for helping frame that conversation. That was really cool. Just the next person I'd like to introduce here is Casey Sorensen. He's the Executive Director at PCs for People. In 2008, Casey incorporated and established PCs for People as a nonprofit organization and opened its corporate headquarters in St. Paul. Under Casey's direction, the organization has distributed nearly 45,000 computers to low-income families across the upper Midwest, and over 14,000 families to low-cost, high-speed internet service. He graduated with a degree in computer information systems from Minnesota State University in Mankato. So we're going to just go ahead and kind of start the panel discussion here, and I'm going to just basically kick it off by asking Casey to just explain a little bit how PCs for People specifically is addressing this digital inclusion gap. Do you want to use the mic here?
Can everyone hear me all right? How about now? And we'll step up and talk loudly. Thanks, Sam. I'll start with just a little bit of information about how PCs for People started, and it was a program that saw a need and grew from there to meet that need. And still, starting in 1998, 18 years later, we're still trying to meet the need for technology. Every computer we get, every internet hotspot we get, there's a person lined up at our door to take it home with them. So we're consistently trying to meet the community need for access to information and for the power that that can have and new worlds that can unlock for people. And that goes back to our starting story in 1998. There was a social worker named Andy who was working with troubled youth in Mankato, Minnesota, and a youth hacked into the computer system and gave himself straight A's. And I joked maybe he should have gone for B's. The school didn't think too highly of it and assigned the boy to Andy, the social worker. And Andy figured, well, this boy has a strength. Why don't we try to foster this strength in a positive light? And this is 1998, and there were a stack of computers in a stairwell that they weren't sure what to do with. So they asked the IT guy, do you think we could take a computer, fix it up, and give it to this boy? The IT guy said, sure. 3 months later, that boy got a job programming web pages for churches in the early days of the internet. The county saw the transformation of one boy and said, do you guys want all our computers? PCs for People was born from there. It was staffed by students from an alternative high school that weren't succeeding in education. They were able to come get hands-on experience refurbishing computers and impacting the community. I went to school in Mankato and volunteered with Andy and got connected to a segment of society where I was able to realize what I was taking for granted. I was using a computer every day in school. I had a computer when I was young. And being able to get into society and help hand out those computers was an eye-opening experience for me. After volunteering, I went off to the corporate world, got a job with Deloitte, was flying out every Monday, back every Friday, wherever my clients were, using my technology degree in automation. So basically my job was, how do I make a Fortune 500 more efficient so they can make more money? After 3 years of doing that, I decided I was ready for different challenges, and I called the social worker, Andy, and said, hey, do you want to formalize this? do you want to see what PCs for People can do and where we can take it? I've been thinking about what led me on that track to success, to education, to a job. And I pinpointed it to when I was 9. I grew up in rural Montana, and my mom was a secretary, dad was a farmer, so we didn't have a lot of money. But my mom saved up for 1 year, got an IBM computer and a DOS for Dummies book. And I decided from that point forward I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted a career in IT. So I quit my job, put in a little bit of money, and established PCs for People as a standalone 501c3 in 2008. Leased our corporate headquarters, which at the time was about 1,000 square feet in the Midway area in St. Paul. Made a bunch of phone calls to businesses asking for donations and got really used to rejection. So we got 400 computers, made about 500 phone calls, and I thought I was going to be sick because 400 computers is a lot. Now I can focus on getting other kids those computers and what I wanted to accomplish. And in less than 2 months, 1,600 households came in. So not only were my 400 computers gone, but we had this huge waiting list that we had to try to overcome to meet the community need. So we had to step back and really analyze our program and analyze the problem, which was much larger than we thought, even in 2008. So we had to set up a recycling program. So one, I call it a misconception of our program, is we're handing out computers. You know, you just get computers, you hand them out. But right now we're handing out 65 a day, Monday through Friday, and we're doing that at low or many times no cost. So we had to figure out how can we meet that need? How can we get a product at no or low cost continuously every day, Monday through Friday? And the solution was a recycling service for businesses. So now instead of calling the businesses and asking them, do you have donations? We call them and say, we're a recycler. We do free pickup, certified data wiping, recycling. We have staff, trucks, warehouse. We now work with over 400 businesses to handle their end-of-life recycling. And that's still not enough to meet the needs. So every day we're making phone calls and we're trying to connect with new businesses. We have 5 to 10 individuals a day stopping by and dropping off their equipment. We're able to sort that equipment. If it's about 8 years old or newer, we refurbish it, and we try to add value on the refurbishing part too. We work with Ramsey County as a transitional work center. So we're able to, people that are trying to find jobs that don't have the experience or maybe have never held a job before, can come to our location, learn how to come to work, learn the technology skills. We work with high schoolers and college students that have had book education but not the hands-on. They can come to our location and we can teach and train the technology skills to help them get their degrees or graduate high school. And all of this happens before the main point of our program, which is handing out computers. So I mentioned 65 computers every day go out. The average recipient is a family of 3 living on $12,000 a year. So I question how the average American household, $55,000, $60,000 a year, family of 3, family of 4, struggles to make ends meet, how the people that are coming to our program to try to better their lives, get jobs, access to information, are able to scrape by on $12,000 a year. But we're able to provide that tool, a computer, that I was in Denver recently talking with a foundation there, and we have an office in Denver, Colorado as well, and I was giving the foundation a tour, and the guy's eyes lit up and said, "You have a multi-generation strategy." I was like, okay, I think I know where you're going with this, but explain. And he said, just by providing a tool, a computer, and a high-speed internet connection in a home, you have the power to lift current and future generations out of poverty in that home. And so they're a partner now in Denver that are helping do this work through a program we call PCs for Kids, where we partner with a school and try to make sure every kid in that school has a home computer. So we can take a truckload of 200 computers to a school and then work with that school to transform education, where they can flip the classroom, they can send home software. So we've been doing this work since 2008 in the Twin Cities, and Sam mentioned 45,000 computers later, there's still a need every single day. We just signed up a new partnership through another nonprofit and Sprint to do $10 a month high-speed unlimited mobile internet, which is critical for the families we work with. It's not uncommon to get 5 phone calls a year with different addresses where people are living. So to be able to have the $10 a month mobile internet to keep families connected to jobs and education. One common question I get is affordability, and that's one of the big things Sam mentioned is income is one of the biggest barriers. What we've noticed is the people coming to our offices are customers. They're consumers. They just don't have the purchasing power that the average household has. So if the average household every year buys a $500 computer, every 3 years buys a $500 computer, we know the purchasing power of our customers is about 1/10 that, so they can afford a $50 computer. And we hand out many free computers. So we've set up this machine, PCs for People, to source equipment, refurbish it, distribute it to meet the community man at a price point where we've gotten a label across the U.S. as being an industry leader, which I marvel at a little bit because we have 22 employees. So what kind of an industry can you lead with 22 employees? But it shows the fragmented nature of this problem, where most metros have an organization like PCs for People on varying scales, trying to meet this need, but it is a huge problem that you can draw multiple circles around. And PCs for People is doing our part connecting internet and computers to people in need now across the U.S. We have internet subscribers in 38 states, and that's something we launched this year. So our focus is here, but we've expanded our scale nationally. So that was a long answer to Sam's question.
And just a reminder, I guess, Bernadine, if you could maybe speak to the Blandin Foundation a little bit and how Blandin is addressing this same issue. I think the mic is working now, if you want to just do that.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Yeah. So, Casey, you said that they can have flipped classrooms, and of course my mind goes right to if they have an internet connection. And it is a big puzzle of work, and I think it's helpful for us to see ourselves as all, where we all fit in the work. I'm sure many of you work, more directly with the populations that you serve in terms of their technology needs and how technology will help them address the challenges or barriers they're experiencing. But without the infrastructure out there, those devices don't work. So, when you go home, if you don't have an internet connection, that's a double down disparity. So I think I just wanted to call out and make people aware that there are some challenges like this that you have to address, especially when it comes down to access and even creating like a culture of use and utilization of broadband in your community at the community scale, and just to see yourself in that broader challenge about making the investments as a state that we need. We've been working hard to build what we call our Rural Broadband Coalition of organizations that care about rural places and schools and other professions. Think about precision ag, for example, and how critical broadband access and utilization is to agriculture or home health care, anything. So trying to help people hold hands on this issue and speak and make our legislators aware that we do need as a state to make these necessary investments. It's going to require the public sector and the private sector to address the market failures that we're seeing that leave rural America and rural Minnesota underserved. So there's plenty of work out there for all of us to do in building from the infrastructure on up through use, access, utilization, and helping us ultimately all understand that we're all responsible for our own well-being.
So I think we tend to get, as we're looking at statistics and talking about things like this, that sometimes we kind of lose the humanity of it a little bit. If maybe Casey, and I guess I'd like to ask both of you, if you could maybe just kind of maybe share a favorite story or something of just what life is like without, because I think a lot of times it's hard for us to kind of remember what it's like without actually having access. So maybe you could just give an example of a story of someone you've run across recently that's kind of enlightened that a little bit.
One of my favorite stories is about applying for jobs, and libraries do a fantastic job of the access piece for a lot of people, but there are some restrictions that come around that. One of my favorite stories, a guy said he was applying for jobs, and it took 3 days to apply for one job at the library. And I said, well, how does it take 3 days for one job application? He said day one he would search and he'd find the job and his time limit would be up, so he'd go home. He'd come back day number 2, fill out all the interview questions, click submit and feel really good about himself. And then it says, please fill out your preliminary interview questions. So he'd come back day number 3 and fill out the preliminary interview questions. He came in and got a computer from us and said he filled out 12 job applications every single day. And he was bringing his computer back to us because he said, I want you to wipe it clean, put more memory in it. I'm going to give it to my daughter because guess what? I got a job as an adjunct professor at the local community college. So that just, hearing those stories, we talk about the need and the statistics, but to be touching lives like that and having an impact is the reason why I left the corporate world to do this work.
That's a great story. You know what, the thing about internet access is that there's that have nothing or have good or have better. And I think it's helpful for trying to get the attention of policymakers and people that are making investment choices to understand the potential economic return on investment when you have the kind of internet that can bring, help us all be producers of wealth and economic activity and not just consumers. So a great example of that is home health care. And I know what a difference it made to my parents at the end of their life to be able to stay in their homes. And especially in rural places where, you know, long roads and bad weather, the opportunity to increase people to age in place with dignity and in being connected to others is really an exciting one that everybody deserves. So I just wanted to point out that it's not only people not having access at all, but that there are ways that this technology can really make a difference in a quality of place in life that we all hope we can get.
I would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about digital literacy. So when issues around the digital divide come up, oftentimes it's kind of 2 parts. It's the digital inclusion, you know, actually providing access, but then there's also once someone has access, how can they get the most of it, or the training side of things. If maybe both of you could speak to the importance or maybe an example of some good digital literacy things that are going on.
PCs for People focuses on once a computer is in the home, what kind of support is needed to make sure a recipient, a family, is successful with that computer. We have about 30,000 computers that are on and active across the U.S., and we're the help desk for those 30,000 computers. So we get 300 to 400 phone calls a day, and many of them are tech support related. I got a new Wi-Fi hotspot. How do I connect to it? I locked myself out. Or actually, usually it's my kid locked the computer out, so we don't know who really did it. To things like viruses, how to use a program. So we take all those phone calls and we focus on providing the support once a computer is in a home and people know what questions they need to ask to utilize the technology to improve their lives. We decided early on that there's a lot of organizations, including libraries, doing great work on education on the front end. So we come in second. So once someone knows that it's something they need that can improve their life, they've been to job search sites, they've been to the library, they've been to job training programs, they've been to schools, and they know they want to have it in their home, we come second, provide the technology, and then the support in the homes.
So there's kind of 2 kinds of people that don't, or there's, as Sam said, there's several reasons, at least 2, why people don't have and use technology. And one of them is incredibly that they don't get it. They don't understand that this is going to improve their quality of life. And it's kind of like if you don't recognize it till you've seen it. So my colleague Fred Underwood, who's the IT director up at the Fond du Lac Reservation, is fond of telling this story. So it's a guy on the reservation who Fred kept trying. He harvests and sells maple syrup, so that's his business. And Fred kept trying to get him to, think about the internet as an asset to his growing his business. And the guy was like, "Go away, Fred. This is my family business. I know everything there's to know. We have all these secret recipes, and I've got these cool little jars that I sell them that are shaped like make-believes, and it's really, really special." And Fred says, "Give me 5 minutes." And he sits down with the computer and he Googles up, maple jars. And there on the screen, you know, are like 50 different distributors of these maple jars. And Fred says, so how much are you paying for yours, you know? And pretty soon the guy is edging Fred out of his seat to sit down and look and see the internet as a tool for enhancing his business. So to me, that really illustrates that it's you got to find the spark in every person when you're talking about people who don't understand the potential benefits, and really market individually to, you know, what it is that, whether it's Skyping with your grandkids, or talking to your service member who's serving abroad, or looking up pin interest boards. You know, it's going to be different for every person. So in terms of sort of the more community level, we've found a lot of success in partnering it with community education. Every community has community education, and the ones that really have it together, they've consolidated all the different offerings into a, you know, no wrong door, one listing of all the community ed. And there are invariably technologists or people that are just, like you, Casey, really good at this stuff, that are willing to train. And it really isn't so much about the curriculum, because people, you know, everybody, to me, it's more getting butts in seats and somebody sitting there real hands-on, helping that person through it. But libraries, of course, are underappreciated and underfunded libraries, and community education systems are good ways to deliver community-wide broadband education.
I guess, Bernadine, I'll maybe just ask you to just elaborate, and then we'll go to Casey too, because you talked in your presentation about community partners and the importance of community partners. Have there been, besides the libraries and the adult basic ed sort of programs or those community education places, have there been any other surprise kind of partners that you've seen in the various programs that you've done? Where like, oh, that really makes sense. And obviously, one community is one community.
Right, right. Well, of course, workforce centers are important partners. Surprisingly, places like cafes and laundromats. Think about it. Where do people who are, you know, economically marginalized spend time? It's in laundromats. And how cool to have, or beauty salons or cafes, to have those kind of public spaces available to, especially in rural places where people may not have cafes. Parks. There's been some great work done to Wi-Fi enable, and Wi-Fi is not the answer, by the way, for access, but in terms of public access for people that may not enjoy it at home and need that third space, that public space to go. Focusing on standing up public access sites can be a great community effort to increase digital access.
In case you need to speak to some partners that have worked well for PCs for People.
Well, the critical component is the 400 businesses we do recycling with, and also partners like the Blandon Foundation. When we had an idea and we weren't sure how we were going to be able to roll it out, like the PCs for Kids idea, to have a foundation step in and say, you know, we've done some research, we see the value of this, we see how technology and internet can impact an entire community, and especially a small community. That truckload of 200 computers, we can take it to Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and hand it out, and overnight provide at least the tool to transform a community. So the businesses we work with, the different foundations, the different school systems we work with have been critical partners.
I've just got one more question, then we'll open it up to everybody else. As far as, you know, if people, when they get back to their offices tomorrow morning and want to just know more about just this issue in general, any good resources that you could maybe just point?
Oh, I have one. I want to commend to everybody the Blandon on Broadband blog, which Ann Tracy runs, and it's just Google that, and it's everything you ever wanted to know more about broadband access, use, politics, technology, communities in Minnesota and around the world.
And mine, I guess, would be us.
NDIA, maybe?
There's, first on us, if you do have people that have a need for technology, we want to be there to serve that need, whether it's free, low-cost repair services. We do $25 repair even if someone didn't get a computer from us. So through your work, if you're connecting with people that just say, I couldn't afford to go to Geek Squad, you can refer them to our organization. We're happy to help with the needs of low and no-cost technology, as well as the Sprint internet. On a national resource, there's NDIA. It's the National Digital Inclusion Alliance that sprang up around the modernization of Lifeline. So expanding Lifeline from telephone to broadband service and what the work the FCC is doing. It's a very active group where you can join for free and be part of their listservs and get information on a national level on digital inclusion.
On the theme of partnerships, just want to add a quick word about you guys. So check out the vision of Casey to see the opportunity in this business model and to then partner not only with rural places across Minnesota, but now across the nation. And I think it's really a very inspiring and successful model because it's got a youth engagement aspect, it's got a workforce development aspect, it helps ties schools back to communities, it solves a waste to, how does that go, waste to profit stream issue. It's one of those beautiful projects, but it wouldn't be possible without your very partnership-focused efforts and every flexibility. So I just kind of bear that in mind too. If any of rural compatriots out there that don't have a PCs for People operation, talk to these guys. That you've stood up 4 now affiliates in the state of Minnesota and rural Minnesota. So I really applaud you for that.
And that is one interesting challenge we have. If we look at a foundation website and we want to apply, we could say, well, we kind of fit there, we kind of fit there, we kind of fit there. Because even from the environmental standpoint, our project hits a lot of foundations funding areas. Maybe not all of them perfectly, but usually we can pick out some reason why we hit most areas.
I guess I'd like to just open it up to the room in general, if there's any specific questions you have for these two very intelligent people up here that know a lot. Anybody?
We have an affiliate in Brainerd, and we work with Kutaska Community Action in Grand Rapids. Andy, the social worker, still runs the Mankato office. So we have those locations where anyone can go and get a computer. We also do projects where we'll deliver computers. So we'll load our box truck and we'll go deliver computers anywhere in the state, as long as we have a partner that can help us cover the costs associated with that. And we've done that as far as we've driven to Bismarck, North Dakota, and handed out 300 computers there, too. We're talking with Google Fiber right now. They're interested in bringing us to one of the Google Fiber cities to do similar work, too. So our interest is getting computers into people and a focus on kids, like the 9-year-old Casey. Yeah. And we're building capacity to try to do that everywhere.
I will just do another quick plug for PCs for People too, though. We also do offer technology to nonprofit organizations. So if your nonprofit is just in need of the hotspot internet service or desktop or laptop computers, we can also provide that at a really affordable price. More questions? It's never good to go home and be like, oh, I wish I would have asked that. So now's the time to do it. Yeah, right in the back.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's interesting. Broadband is important to everybody, but it's nobody's number one topic. So when they go up with their short list of their lobbying agenda, our effort has been trying to get broadband at least on the list. So if it can't be number 1, it's number 2 or 3, so that the legislators are hearing from everybody who's trying to make Minnesota more prosperous that broadband is really important. That just real quickly, the three big issues are, should we have a fund to fund broadband infrastructure build-out? We have for the last couple of years. It's administered through DEED in the Office of Broadband Development. And right now, today, live this week, they're debating the size of that fund, whether it should be $35 million. The Republicans on the House side have proposed, and the governor and the task force have proposed $100 million. Task force has estimated that it's going to take $3.2 billion to meet our border-to-border broadband goals that the governor's articulated at the current FCC definition, which many of us would argue is inadequate, and it's a standard for tomorrow, or yesterday, not tomorrow. So that is something to contact your legislators about if you have opinion about whether or not public funding should be made available to build out access to broadband networks. And there's also then a question about the telecom reform, which I think you alluded to. And, I confess to you that that is very arcane stuff. I know that the industry wants a change in how they're regulated, and I know that the Attorney General's office in the past has had consumer protection concerns about that, and what are the implications of releasing some of the providers from their landline provisions, that you have to be the provider of last resort, and that you have to have a telephone line to every residence. Those are the kind of issues at play there, and they matter. So I urge you to pay attention to that debate. And then finally, the debate is a little bit around, from a public investment perspective, do we want public dollars funding networks that that serve the unserved, people who have absolutely no access today, or does the state view it as an economic development tool and public funding should go to the underserved communities, meaning where there's broadband already, but it's just really crummy and it's not good enough? And so where that line will be drawn will be very interesting. But I guess to sum up, the one public policy area that I think we should all have our eye on is whether or not and how much we as a state should invest in making sure that all Minnesotans have the broadband they need to live the lives they want to.
Yeah.
So, are there tools and directions, so we aren't able to give the people we serve, like ideally we would be able to connect all the people that we serve to these people to be able to access. Are there tools out there that we recommend that people can use useful just to be able to connect with these people? Is this not, like, are there new innovative things that we should be looking for to connect with people if they don't have that necessarily access?
So is the question on just options for access and where to direct people? There are, I think, underutilized computer labs. Part of the BTOP stimulus money, there were multiple computer labs created around the Twin Cities that were never fully utilized in a lot of cases. And some of those are still open and running and have open computer seats in them. So the public access component would be a good one as an introductory. For getting computers into homes, there are Free Geek is one that's in Minneapolis, and they have Linux-based computers that they hand out similar to the work that we do. Am I missing any?
The one other thing, too, are you in the Twin Cities area? The one other good resource for people that are in the metro area is and probably some of the CTEP people can speak to it, is the Technology Learning Collaborative has a website where you can basically punch in an address, and it pulls up all of the learning, I think they call them community technology centers in the area, so you can see most of the libraries pop up, and there are those labs that are there as well. I'm not familiar, or maybe you are, Bernadine, if there's anything outside the metro area. Probably not, but maybe.
The Office of Broadband Development is contemplating looking into adding layers on their maps that they retain for access maps, public access sites, and other attributes like that. And you can, again, it's a funding staff issue, so that's something else you can help advocate that they get the capacity to do that. I know they aspire to.
And that NDIA that I mentioned earlier does have a map of affiliates that are part of that that digital inclusion conversation, and there's quite a few across Minnesota that are on that map too. They might not all deal with access or internet, but they'll run the spectrum. Maybe they do some training as well.
Anything else before we wrap for the day? Okay, well, we'll be up here if anybody has any questions, but certainly I appreciate your time and willingness to be here. So yeah, I think everybody's dismissed, I guess. All right.
Thank you.